I'm going to make a series of videos that covers each of the Latin noun cases, all of its uses. So depending on your level of Latin, I may cover areas where the case is used that you won't hit for a very long time. But I thought it would be useful to have one video on each of the cases that covers everything you would know after a full traditional first year of Latin. And then we can always revisit it for different points and pieces. And maybe I can edit and take cuts of it later. But for right now, I'm going to start with a discussion of all the cases quickly, and then I'm going to cover the nominative case in this video. And then I probably do vocative in this video too. And then from there, I'll do each of the other cases on its own. So to start, Latin cases refer to the noun cases. And in Latin, we use Latin cases. We use endings to tell us what case something is, and the case tells us how that word is used in the sentence. So if it's in the nominative, that is used for the subject of our sentence. We also use it for predicate nominative. Genitive is used largely for possession. The girl's book, the girl goes into the genitive. Dative, and the name dative comes from the word do, dari, dedi, datum, to give, and it's for our indirect object. That notion of giving something to someone is what gave us that indirect object. So it makes sense that the name of it comes from the verb to give. Accusative, that's principal role is direct object. What did you give to someone else? I gave the book. The book's the direct object. We can also use accusative to be the object of some prepositions. Accusative prepositions, generally push forward. Place to which, where am I moving forward? And whenever you have forward momentum, you can come up against something. So those words that are against, through, all those fall into the accusative world too. The rest of the prepositions fall under the ablative. The standard ablative translation is by, with, or from. I read an article by John. That's an ablative kind of thing. I'm going to the store with Susie. That's an ablative kind of thing. I'm walking away from the tennis court. That's an ablative thing. Accusative, there's no standard definition. It's actually really the noun usually, because the standard is the direct object. Dative, we might use to or for. I gave the book to the girl. I cared deeply for Joni. It's a more complex use of dative that we get later on. Possession, we use of, the book of the girl, or apostrophe S or S apostrophe. This one is usually singular. This one is usually plural, but not all nouns use an S to make a plural, and not all things that end in an S are plural, so that changes sometime. So if I wanted to say the child's book versus the children's book, I still use apostrophe S, because the plural is the REN as a German word, not an S. If I'm dealing with the boys' book versus the boys' plural book, that's where I have apostrophe S versus S apostrophe. Nominative, the standard translation is the noun, just like with the accusative. There's no special modifier. The girl walks the dog. She's the subject. She's the one doing the walking. I don't need another word to connect it in English to the sentence. So we're going to start with the nominative case. The primary use is as the subject of a finite verb. Now, this is a little different than when we talked about it in Intro to Latin. If you're in Intro to Latin and watching this word I left out when we discussed it. Why? Because I didn't want to complicate the issue. Every sentence we have up until a certain point has a finite verb. What's the opposite of a finite verb? Infinitive. So the infinitive is to run, but she runs is a finite verb. It's already been conjugated. It's already attached to that subject. So not to spoil anything that's coming up, the subject of an infinitive is not in the nominative. If we were learning to speak Latin, instead of learning how to decode Latin and translate Latin, we would have learned about infinitives and their subjects much earlier because it's used for indirect statements. I think that I will go to the store. It's that kind of a sentence. We'll talk about that more with accusative. For now, we want to remember nominative subjects for regular finite verbs. For conjugated verbs would be a good way to think of it. We can also use the nominative for predicate nominatives. So when we talked about predicate nominatives in Intro to Latin, we focused mostly on that verb sum, to be. I am a woman. Speaking personally at this moment, it's a statement I can make. This is the subject. I'm the one who's being. This is a form of the verb to be, which is like an equal sign. I equal, one of the things I equal is woman. This is the predicate nominative. It's a nominative that sits in the verb, meaning to the right of the verb in English, that describes or gives more information about the subject. I can make other statements that are equally true that are also predicate nominative examples. For example, I am a teacher. I'm still the subject. The verb is still to be. This is another thing that I am. And that is another predicate nominative. But it's not just the verb to be. It's similar verbs too. So I'll give you two other examples for the video. Fio means to be made, to be done, or to happen. So what would a sentence be? The vase to be made is large. Tall. I could do all sorts of adjectives. Can I think of another noun? The vase is a vase. No, that doesn't work. The vase is an urn. I could use that. The vase to be made is an urn. Oh, but then I'm back to be again. I'm going to find a better example. Let me go to the next verb. Videor. Videor, to seem. To seem. What would an example of videor be? The woman seems like a good teacher. And I may be narcissistic too. This is a sentence I could think of. What can I say? Maybe I'm a bad teacher and you can put in bad there and my example still works. But if I just said teacher, it sounded weird. The woman, still my subject. The woman is the one who is seeming like. Seems like is my verb. Seems, we like the like in there in English because it helps us complete the thought. Teacher is my predicate nominative here. It is not a direct object. I haven't taken and there's no transitive here. There's no action. We're just describing something that is. I still haven't thought of a Theo example. I'm gonna have to look up one. I'm sorry. It's not a verb I've encountered often for many things, at least not in a long time. But Whittier, definitely I see a lot of that one. Since nominative is a shorter case to cover, and vocative is even shorter, I am going to pair the two together. So back up in our chart here, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative, vocative. Now, when I memorized the cases and endings, I had to chant vocative too. I've stopped it mostly in class. Sometimes it still sneaks in, but it does fall at the bottom of our list. It's used for direct address, which can also be stated to say that it is the person or thing to be addressed. So it's commonly used with imperative. Imperative is command. So if we think for a moment, Forrest Gump, run, Forrest, run. Run is an imperative. It's a command. It almost has in it an assumed you, because you're looking out at a person and commanding to them. You're not speaking to yourself. You're not talking about someone who could be a third person. It has a second person feeling. But what if you need to address that person? Run! And now Forrest doesn't know you're talking to him. Run, Forrest, run! Forrest goes in the vocative, so that they know that that's the person who's being commanded. It's usually post-positive. What do we mean by that? It's a fancy term to say that it can't be the first word in the sentence. So just like Forrest was in the middle of run, Forrest, run, that would fit that post-positive. Another example, porta, carry, marca, Marcus, because remember we got to put it in the vocative. Us, o, o, Just reaching back to that second declension. Porta, marque, hos libros, carry those books, Marcus. I'm going to stop here. End of the nominative, vocative, covered all 6 cases quick. And the next video, I will cover genitive.